This video isn't about speculation, but if you hold even one XRP, if you're discovering this content valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. It genuinely helps us deliver you faster and more precise crypto analysis. It could be one of the most critical things you watch this week. And that's not exaggeration. Because while everyone is preoccupied by Bitcoin headlines and Ethereum transaction costs, something far more significant is quietly materializing beneath the surface of the financial system. It doesn't trend on social media. It doesn't depend on memes. It doesn't require hype cycles. It's called XRP. And it was never constructed to impress retail traders. It was constructed to function, and that's the first element most observers overlook. Bitcoin is exceptional as a store of value. Ethereum transformed what smart contracts could accomplish, but XRP was designed for a completely different purpose. Not as a speculative instrument, not as a digital collectible. XRP was engineered as infrastructure, the kind of infrastructure that global finance genuinely requires, the kind that banks, institutions, and governments can integrate without reconstructing the entire system. That's why the Ripple team doesn't resemble a typical crypto startup. These aren't hoodie-wearing developers pursuing hype. These are professionals who operate more like investment bankers and financial engineers. Many of them originate directly from Wall Street, elite institutions, and legacy finance. They comprehend compliance, they comprehend regulation, and most importantly, they comprehend how money genuinely moves at scale. Ripple isn't attempting to replace the financial system overnight. They're upgrading it quietly, piece by piece. Now pause here for a moment because this is where positioning matters more than timing. Public markets price XRP as if it's still early stage. Private institutions are valuing it very differently based on utility, flow, and long-term integration. This is where the insiders separate from the crowd. Private XRP valuations far exceed public prices. And this distinction, public perception versus private positioning, is critical because markets don't move when everyone agrees. They move when reality catches up to what insiders already understand. Ripple understands that the next phase of crypto isn't memes or speculation. It's tokenized real-world assets, stablecoins replacing dollars, treasury bills moving on-chain, stocks, bonds, and real estate settling digitally, instantly, across borders. Consider how money moves today. Cross-border payments are slow, expensive, and fragmented. Banks rely on outdated correspondent banking networks that can take days to settle and cost a fortune in fees. Capital gets trapped in Nostro and Vostro accounts around the world, sitting idle just so institutions can settle transactions. It's inefficient by design. XRP solves that. XRP acts like a bridge asset. It allows value to move from one currency to another in seconds at a cost of less than a penny. No pre-funded accounts, no waiting days for settlement, no layers of intermediaries taking a cut, just instant liquidity on demand. That's why XRP isn't just another coin. It's a link, a rail, a neutral asset that doesn't belong to any one country or central bank, yet can connect all of them. And here's where things become interesting. While retail investors argue online about price targets, major institutions are positioning quietly. 11 major financial players representing over $240 billion in assets have formally filed to launch an XRP ETF. Let that register. This isn't rumor. This isn't speculation. These are regulated institutions requesting SEC permission to give Wall Street direct exposure to XRP. We've already witnessed what happens when that door opens. When Bitcoin's ETF was approved, institutions didn't tiptoe in. They flooded the market. Billions of dollars flowed into Bitcoin in a matter of weeks. Liquidity exploded. The entire narrative shifted from risky experiment to institutional-grade asset. Now ask yourself an honest question. What happens if XRP gets that same green light? Because unlike Bitcoin, XRP already has a defined use case tied directly to global payment flows. It's not waiting to become useful someday. It's already being used. Banks, payment providers, and financial institutions are actively integrating Ripple's technology into real-world systems. And this isn't theory. Ripple holds over 60 regulatory licenses across the globe. They've spent years working with regulators instead of fighting them. They didn't run from oversight, they embraced it. That's why when the SEC lawsuit finally ended, Ripple didn't just survive, they emerged stronger, clearer, and more legitimate than ever. That legal clarity changed everything. One of the most overlooked developments right now is Ripple's stablecoin, RLUSD. It launched quietly, without hype, without marketing theatrics. And yet in just 6 months, RLUSD grew from zero to over $500 million in market capitalization. That's not normal growth. That's institutional adoption. RLUSD didn't just climb the rankings. It jumped from the 36th largest stablecoin to the 17th in record time. It's now one of the fastest growing stablecoins in the world, second only to BlackRock's BUI. Think about that for a moment. Ripple is competing directly with BlackRock and PayPal in the stablecoin race. But what really matters isn't just RLUSD's growth. It's how RLUSD interacts with XRP. On the XRP Ledger, XRP is the native asset. That means when assets are exchanged, XRP is often used as the bridge to route liquidity efficiently. This process is called auto-bridging. Every time RLUSD is traded on the XRP Ledger, XRP facilitates that transaction, and every transaction burns a small amount of XRP permanently. This is where supply dynamics come into play. Unlike many cryptocurrencies with inflationary models, XRP's supply slowly decreases over time as usage increases. More transactions mean more burns. More burns mean less supply. Less supply combined with growing institutional demand creates upward pressure on price. And here's the part most people aren't pricing in. Right now, about 83% of RLUSD activity happens on Ethereum, not the XRP ledger. Why? Familiarity. Developers and users default to what they know. But Ethereum comes with congestion, higher fees, and slower settlement. As RLUSD adoption grows, cost efficiency will matter, speed will matter, settlement certainty will matter. And when that shift happens, when RLUSD volume migrates more heavily to the XRP ledger, the burn rate for XRP accelerates dramatically. That's the hidden lever. XRP doesn't need hype-driven demand to rise. It needs usage. And usage is growing quietly, systematically, and globally. Meanwhile, the broader crypto market is setting the stage. Bitcoin continues to attract institutional capital. Analysts like Mike McGlone and Tom Lee have openly discussed Bitcoin reaching $150,000, $200,000, even $300,000 in this cycle. If that happens, capital doesn't stop at Bitcoin. It flows outward into infrastructure plays with real utility. XRP sits squarely in that category. At today's prices, XRP is still being valued like a speculative altcoin, but its role is closer to financial plumbing. And plumbing doesn't need to be exciting. It needs to be everywhere. The global stablecoin market sits around $250 billion today. Over the next few years, that number is expected to grow to $1.2 trillion. That growth won't be evenly distributed. It will concentrate around platforms that can handle scale, regulation, and interoperability. Ripple has been preparing for this for years. As stablecoin volume grows, as real-world assets move on-chain, as institutions demand faster and cheaper settlement, XRP's relevance increases, not because of speculation, but because of necessity. And that's why the ETF matters so much. An XRP ETF isn't just a price catalyst, it's a signal. It tells Wall Street that XRP is acceptable, that it's investable, that it belongs in portfolios designed for global finance exposure. And once that door opens, demand doesn't trickle in. It rushes, especially when the asset in question is still priced under double digits. Most people still analyze XRP using the wrong framework. They compare it to meme coins or even to Bitcoin, asking questions like, can it go 10x or is it too centralized? But that misses the point entirely. XRP is closer to a financial protocol than a speculative token. Its value comes from how much capital flows through it, not how many people tweet about it. Think about Visa for a moment. Visa doesn't hold your money. It doesn't speculate. It facilitates transactions. And because trillions of dollars move through Visa's rails every year, the company itself is incredibly valuable. XRP is aiming to play a similar role, but on a global, asset-agnostic level, without being tied to any single country or currency. Right now, trillions of dollars move across borders every single day. Foreign exchange markets alone clear over $7 trillion daily. Most of that activity still relies on systems built decades ago. Slow settlement, high friction, counterparty risk, capital locked up unnecessarily. XRP was built specifically to solve that inefficiency. And unlike many crypto projects, Ripple didn't try to force adoption from the bottom up. They went straight to the top. Banks, payment providers, central banks, regulators, that approach takes longer. But when it works, it scales far faster and lasts far longer. This is why regulatory clarity was such a big turning point. For years, the SEC lawsuit acted like a ceiling over XRP's price and perception. Institutions stayed cautious, funds stayed on the sidelines, but behind the scenes, Ripple continued expanding internationally. When that legal cloud lifted, it didn't just remove risk, it unlocked demand. Now institutions can engage without fear of retroactive enforcement. ETF issuers can file, asset managers can model XRP into long-term strategies. At current levels, XRP is still priced as if it's optional, as if it might be useful someday. But the truth is, it's already useful, it's already live, and it's already integrated into systems that move real money. When Bitcoin ETFs launched, billions flowed in within weeks. That wasn't because Bitcoin suddenly changed. It was because access changed. XRP faces a similar dynamic, but with an important difference. XRP supply dynamics are fundamentally tighter over time due to burn mechanics tied to usage. Now consider the broader market context. If Bitcoin reaches $150,000 this cycle, as many analysts expect, the total crypto market cap expands dramatically. Historically, once Bitcoin establishes a clear top range, capital rotates into assets with strong fundamentals and real-world use cases. Under a $150,000 Bitcoin scenario, an XRP price around $5 isn't aggressive, it's conservative. At $250,000 Bitcoin, XRP moving toward $8.9 becomes entirely reasonable, especially if an ETF is live and RLUSD adoption continues accelerating. And remember, those numbers don't assume global domination overnight. They assume steady integration, growing transaction volume, and normal market conditions. XRP doesn't need to replace Bitcoin or Ethereum to win. It occupies a different lane. Bitcoin stores value. Ethereum executes logic. XRP moves value. Those roles are complementary, not competitive. In a world where trillions of dollars in assets are tokenized, settlement speed and liquidity become critical. All of that needs rails. Ripple's technology is designed to be those rails. This is why governments are warming up. This is why institutions are filing ETFs. This is why Ripple continues to secure licenses globally. And this is why XRP keeps showing up quietly in conversations that actually matter. The market hasn't fully priced this in yet, but markets always catch up to reality eventually. As more RLUSD volume shifts to the XRP ledger, as ETF demand materializes, as transaction volume rises, and as supply continues to shrink through burn, XRP's valuation framework changes. It stops being treated like a speculative altcoin and starts being valued like financial infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't move in small increments once adoption reaches critical mass. The pieces are already on the board. The only thing left is execution. And Ripple has spent years proving that execution is exactly what they do best. This isn't a bet on hype, it's a position on infrastructure adoption and the inevitable modernization of global finance. And moments like this, when clarity meets undervaluation, are rare. If you found value in this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe. This is not financial advice.